and we'll take you up until 6 o'clock, joined by former Baylor quarterback and Baylor radio broadcast analyst, J.J. Joe, who was on with us quite a bit during the football season and also wanted to get his take, like we've had with others this week on the quarterback decision, and also what we were just talking about as well with the NIL and more. JJ, thanks for your time. Hope you've been doing well. So when you saw the decision, when we reported the decision on Sic'Em 365, what was your reaction?
I thought it, first of all, Smoke, I thought it was the right decision. Let me say that. I thought it was the right one, but I was surprised. I will be honest. I was surprised, but once the day went to Tuesday, I figured that probably was a positive for Blake because Gary, I thought, would be a pretty quick decision for Coach.
So, JJ, why do you think Blake ultimately should be and is the guy?
I just think it allows for the offense to be a little bit more dynamic. I mean, just it's varied and dynamic. They're going to be able to run the ball. I mean, that's what Coach Grimes does. Coach Mateos coaches the line real well. I think he brought in Coach Baker to coach those receivers up a little bit, and especially when you have young ones. But Blake just has the knack of processing the defense, reading the defense, and then he can activate all areas of the field in the passing game. Wide right, wide left, deep, middle, underneath, and he's pretty accurate. So I just thought the offense was different when he was in the game. And if you remember from last year, it was just different when he came in.
I've heard a lot of takes, analysts that do know what they're talking about, probably a lot more than I do, but about how Gary also was positive when it comes to the running game because he's bigger, more physical, and all that with what he did a year ago, and I get that. But doesn't a better and more effective or explosive passing game help the running game too?
Hey, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. You're exactly right. And I think that the game plans will change some. They will try to protect Blake a little bit. Now, Blake is not a bad athlete. He's a baseball player, but he's not the same type of athlete as Gary Bohannon. He's 6 foot, maybe 6 foot, 6'1", 190. Gary's 6'3", 220. You're just not going to put him in harm's way as much. But he's about Charlie's size. And I think Charlie's issue more so was, he had the head issues. But if you can pass the ball and activate certain areas of the field in the passing game, that then changes the math for the defensive coordinator. And I think a great example was the difference between how Oklahoma State defended us in the first game at home when they played at home and how they had to defend us the second time they saw us. Totally different.
JJ, I really wish we could have seen a healthy Blake Shapen in the second half of that Big 12 title game and then seen what would have happened in the Sugar Bowl. I'm just curious how that quarterback competition would have been viewed coming out of New Orleans had Blake played in that game. But then again, we don't know what the result would have been. So that will all remain a mystery, and he's won the job now. But looking at the green and gold game last Saturday, just what were some of your major impressions that you took away? Obviously, there was a lot to look for, but what were maybe a couple things that popped most for you?
I would say really, offensively, I was really looking at the wideouts. Of course, I was watching quarterbacks. I figured that was going to be the game that, kind of capped it off for Coach. But I was looking at the receivers. I knew we had Hal Presley out. But I didn't know much about Jordan Cameron. Josh Cameron and Jordan Cameron, I always get that mixed up because I got two sons, and one's named Jordan, one's named Josh. But he played well. It's a nice body. I didn't know much about him. We knew about Monterey Baldwin. We knew about a couple of the other ones. But I was really watching the receivers. And then I wanted to defensively, I wanted to see how the young corners, behind Walcott and behind Milton, how those guys look, because they will have to play. And then the last thing for me, because I feel good about our lines, is really looking at our safeties, because I know we're trying to move Christian Morgan around. So, I'm concerned whenever we potentially may have two brand new deep safeties. Football is played inside out. And you got to have, if you're solid inside with the quarterback, center, Mike, and safeties, you're usually going to have a pretty good team.
JJ, it is the last 2 days of April. Football's over as far as practice, spring drills, whatever. There is the offseason and much more. What about Blake Shapen and the time he has? And they know him, the receivers, offensive linemen, defensive players. They know who he's been for the last year or so. What about him getting control of that team as far as the leader. You don't raise your hand. Being named the starting quarterback doesn't mean you're the leader. But how much time do you feel like he has plenty of time between now and August to be able to kind of grab that? Like, because Gary was known as obviously very special when it comes to that.
Yeah, I would say Gary. I mean, and I haven't gotten to, really spend a lot of time with Gary, but he seems to be, he's a very positive, great young man, hard worker, immense talent. I don't want this to minimize the talent that Gary has. I said this, I think, earlier this week. Gary has an NFL arm. So, I mean, we'll talk about who has the better arm strength. But I think Blake, he's been in the system, Smoke. That's what I like about him. He's been there. He competed with Gary last year, didn't come out on top. He played this year in significant, high-leverage moments. That's what helps you secure your spot is this my team or not? Now, you have to do the daily stuff. You got to show up. You got to throw extra. You got to watch more film. You got to be there. You got to be consistent. You can't be a knucklehead if you're a quarterback. You got to be someone who's, everybody may be hanging out, but you're probably hanging out for a little bit and getting out of there. But so he has to do the things he's been doing, and I think he'll be fine. I mean, he's got plenty of time. They all know him. Mm-hmm. And I watch how guys interact, Craig, with with each other, and it looks like they interact pretty well with Blake and really like it when he's successful, and they love Gary when he's successful. So I think he's going to be fine.
Did you see anything that you liked from Kyron Drones or C.J. Rogers?
Hey, I think everybody saw C.J. Rogers. I mean, I had heard about C.J. last year. They talked about they really liked this kid from Argyle. And I was like, well, who is that, right? And you don't see much of him. But I mean, shoot, he launched one where I just was sure there was no way he's gonna be able to get that ball to Bonner, and he threw that thing about a good 57 to 60 in the air. Kyron Drones is still developing. I think you can see Kyron's athleticism. You can see his ability to move around. But he's still developing the pass game. They want to put him on the move. They want to get it, down to single reads, which is fine. I mean, he's a young player as well. So I think those guys are both promising young quarterbacks. But you could tell. I mean, there's a gap. There was a gap between those guys and Gary and Blake. And I think even in the spring game, I thought Blake was a step ahead of Gary. And I think that ultimately is what helped Coach make his decision.
Was the decision obviously that he made early, quickly? When he said that Saturday, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to probably drag into the late week. And then I know the May 1st deadline, the transfer, whatever else. What did it say to you about Dave Aranda that he didn't let this linger, and he made the decision knowing that most likely whoever was going to be one, the other guy was going to enter the transfer portal, in this case, Gary Bohannon?
Well, I mean, a little behind the scenes. I mean, I'd heard that he's going to name one. I mean, I was talking to a crew, and I heard when I came in, I was like, well, why? And I was thinking in my head, like, why is he going to do that? That doesn't make sense. I'd hold as many as I could personally. I'm a little selfish, but, Coach Aranda just stand up. I mean, he is seriously more about the person than the player. He says the person is greater than the player. And this is, to me, was him showing that. Most coaches would make this battle, especially since it's so close, go into the fall, and they'll at least have both of them on the roster. Potentially. Someone still may step out. So he didn't do that. He's a stand-up guy. It's going to help him I think long-term it's going to help him. And, it's interesting because, I think we all believed Gary was ahead. And the whole time during the spring, I would put stuff in notes like the competition is thick. And not that I've seen it. I just saw Blake play last year. Mm. And if you told me last year, if I watched both of them, you asked me after the season, who'll start next year, I would have said Blake.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, that would have been so interesting had he been healthy, that had that whole month of December to compete. But yeah, I think you're right, JJ, and I would agree. I would have said the same thing. I was curious, have you had much of a chance to talk to Dallas Baker at all since he arrived?
I have not. Okay. Unfortunately, I haven't. I mean, I only got down for the spring game, so I hadn't had much chance to visit with him at all.
Sure. I was just wondering because, man, it seems like Aranda's really had some nice remarks about him, and talking about these young receivers and how they looked last Saturday. If it was up to you, do you feel like there's still a need to try and see if there's maybe a veteran out there, or do you think you can ride into 2022 with a bunch of inexperienced and young but talented guys and still feel confident about what you're doing?
I think you can. Here's my only concern. My only concern is, Blake's strength is the passing game. And it's, it would really help if he had someone who's cut their teeth a little bit. I mean, like Estrada. Estrada didn't play D1 necessarily, or at least high-level D1. He came from the Ivy League, but really good receiver, high-talented, very smart receiver. It would help to have at least one, addition to kind of help give Blake a little experience out there. But I'll tell you, they can develop together. All of these guys are young. Blake has 3 years, and sometimes growing together is pretty good as well.
What was your overall impressions? Because spring games can sometimes bore the hell out of, not so much me, but there are times and it looks like grass is growing. I know it's important for everybody that's getting a snap, but it did seem to have some, the fact that there were big plays on offense. I don't think that's because the defense was bad. I think that there's some young, electric-type talent on this team offensively.
Yeah, I mean, Coach has done a great job of building on what Coach Rule started with some of the talent that's here. He's going into now his third season. But I liked it. He ran it like a game. I mean, he had kicking game. And you could tell. I mean, this is what to me, to have real competition in the spring, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like having, hey, we have some battles. And not only having a battle, but having it where we have 2 good ones or 3 good ones. And that's when you're building a program. Because you're looking out there and you're like, well, man, he has options at these positions and the competition is thick. And that makes spring, to me, much better because up front, hey, man, if I don't do this, there's one of my teammates here that can do it at a high level as well. So I liked what he's doing. I like the roster he's building. And I think the decisions and how he goes about things is going to only help him get really good players or continue to get really good players.
JJ, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about a story outside of Baylor. We were just talking about this Miami story from last night with Isaiah Wong and basically threatening to leave Miami if he doesn't get increased NIL past the deal that he originally agreed to. And I don't know how involved this is because of Nigel Pack and the money they apparently gave him. But as a former college athlete who certainly would have benefited from NIL, I think most everybody's on board with players getting paid. But what do you think about that situation in particular? Not a surprise that this is probably happening, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am a proponent of, helping the player, especially since this is big business. But look, I mean, I hate to see that because I think this is the wild, wild west, I think. I heard somebody say. But look, I look at it like the issue here is that the adults failed us. The NCAA, the conference, and this is my opinion, the conference director, they failed us because they didn't get ahead of it. And then all of a sudden we let a court make a decision to where then now everything is allowed. So now how do you put the genie back in the bottle? Well, it's going to require the NCAA, in my opinion, as well as these conference directors and school presidents to come up with a framework, something that makes sense. I'm a proponent of players being taken care of. But now what has to happen, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle, is that they're going to have to actually kind of come up and give the players some representation and negotiate something so we get past all this, hey, give me extra $1 million and I'll stay. I mean, that's not really what we want from college athletics. We want to help them, but now we're getting into pro ball. And, and that's, it's big business, but there is a little difference, in my opinion, between, the next level and college athletics. And we can figure that middle ground if the adults stand up and be adults.
Thank you, JJ, as always, man. Great for your time. Appreciate your time. Thanks to hear from you.
Thank you, guys. You have a good one.
Thanks for your time. Great to hear from you. Golly, I just went backwards on that one. Thanks. That's JJ Joe, former Baylor quarterback, Baylor radio color analyst for football.